The symptoms of trauma can have many different forms. Most people come with depression, anxiety, burnout, addiction, which are actually all coping strategies. A good way to categorize the symptoms of trauma is to create two groups. One group of symptoms is coming from a hyper-aroused nervous system that can express itself through worries and concerns, like constant worries and concerns, through anxiety, fears, and panic attacks. There is that constant sense often in a person that something is about to happen. Life is not safe. I am not safe. Wherever I am, I'm not safe. It can express itself through irritation, frustration, constant being ready to fight, anger, rage, rageful expressions. And it comes from very often there's an underlying sense of threat. Something is not okay here. I have to be ready for something, which very often has no actual reason. Another group comes from what we call hypoactivation of the nervous system. That is a shutdown of the nervous system that can express itself through withdrawing and isolating, numbing, feels like a depression. I'm trapped. I'm stuck. There's a sense of hopelessness, helplessness, and overall numbness. So these are what most people can really feel in themselves. In short form, it's CPTSD. And the C stands for complex. So it can have really many, many forms. It can reach from a highly functioning, very successful lifestyle, successful in many regards, successful in the regards of work and business, and successful in the field of family and relationship, to being feeling severely damaged, having a highly disrupted capacity for relationship, for even work, a life with no meaning, no purpose. Not even being able to activate, even to a degree of hospitalization for depression, being on medication. So the range is huge. But actually what it all comes down to is that sense, that internal sense that whatever happens outside in the outside reality, internally I'm not okay. There might be moments that I am okay. Let's say like when I drink alcohol, or when I'm isolating in my room, or when I just achieved a big business success, or when I come home from a shopping spree and I have 20 bags of useless things that I bought in shopping malls. But deep down, I'm not really satisfied. Deep down, I have that sense that all that doesn't really help me. It's a life disconnected from what's authentic and alive within me. Trauma can express itself in life in many different forms. And very often, this dysregulated nervous system expresses itself through a restlessness, sleeping disorders, nightmares, waking up in the night, sweaty, and being like, as just as if just coming from a fight. It can also express itself through feeling tired, with the body very heavy, very difficult to move and get me going. It very often is it's very difficult to create relationships, fulfilling, lasting, safe connections. It expresses itself through not being able to regulate the own emotions. Feelings are just like too much. Often, I don't really know, am I angry? Am I scared? What am I? I just know it's too much. So the ability to self-regulate is very often compromised to some degree, sometimes even completely disrupted. I'm happy to give you some examples of how that could look like. And again, as complex PTSD is very complex, there's no typical person, but there are some things that actually come up regularly. For example, a person that is isolating in their room, they like to get lost in either video games, in binge watching series, Netflix or whatever. They might take numbing drugs, smoke a lot of weed there in their room, and it's very difficult to get up and do something. And it's even more difficult to go out and create relationships that actually we're all hardwired to need. Their typical way of relating is through avoiding relationship, avoiding connection. Many people avoid relationships because they have learned that connection is not something that is safe. And actually, very often have learned that relationship is something that is dangerous to them. And then very often, relationship is something that they're scared of. So there's a deep fear of relationship. And that very often contradicts with the deepest desire for connection that then meets a very deep fear of connecting and relating. The root cause of this fear very often comes with the experience, very often during childhood, that connection is nothing that I can trust. Connection is something that is even threatening to me. It's unsafe to connect and relate. And this fear is kept in the nervous system. Even when people know intellectually, they know that, yeah, here it's safe to connect. Their nervous system speaks a different language. They keep in their nervous system that deep-seated fear that actually it's not safe. And that nervous system then goes into shutting down, into wanting to withdraw, going into numbing, because that is a place, or like getting very overbusy in the mind, going into the room, hiding under the blanket, and then reading, scrolling through the internet. So one of the main reasons why it is challenging for survivors of trauma, and I'm talking about shock trauma as much as childhood or developmental trauma, complex PTSD, is that the medical community isn't really well educated about trauma. This whole trauma-informed movement still is, you can call it like an avant-garde. It's still kind of cutting edge. It still hasn't trickled down and became a common part of scientific medical education. Many clients come to trauma treatment completely highly medicated by different kind of psychiatric medicines, actually chemical toxins, that numb certain parts of the brain. And that's more like fiddling around with the symptoms rather than addressing the root cause. One of the findings of trauma therapy, scientific trauma studies, is that trauma is not only creates certain patterns of thinking and behaving, it creates a dysregulation of the nervous system. And for healing trauma, the dysregulation of the nervous system kind of needs to be addressed or at least be taken into account. As a result of trauma, there is very often a somewhat compromised or disrupted capacity to deal with emotions. So that needs to be addressed too. And for trauma survivors, it can be very challenging to form fulfilling relationships or to grow into some meaningful work that they can follow with passion and purpose. All of that is often not sufficiently covered with that conventional psychotherapy that in many Western countries the health insurance would pay for. And then there's a total lack of education in the whole, not only education system, that would maybe even support pupils or children that in school or at university start to show certain maladaptive behaviors, or in the system of law enforcement, or in the medical system in general. Many clients, let's say like one simple example, come with a digestive problem and with pain in their stomach. And then they go through medical examinations and even MRI scans and stuff, and there's no physical real reason can be found. And it very often not a single medical practitioner comes to the idea that can be stress related, that stress can come from like stress that is kept in the body since childhood, or why it's so hard for people to find proper treatment for trauma is the lack of education, healing modalities that don't take into account the neurological dysregulation, the lack of emotional self-regulation, and the disrupted capacity for relationship. I can speak from my own experience that many clients report that they couldn't really find sufficient healing through conventional psychotherapy. And they're wondering why would that be, although they have talked through everything. And what I'm usually telling them is that it's not the talking through painful experiences that brings any healing. It's that feeling the pain that is connected to that story, being able to process that in a mature, in a healthy way, being able to spot and deal with the nervous system dysregulation that it causes, and then to create a different relationship or a different form of relating to this whole emotional, physical, psychobiological reaction that happens inside. So it's not only talking through, but it's the feeling it fully that makes a difference. When it comes to the environment, the first thing that I want to mention is that the fastest way to heal trauma is always to go slow and steady. And at the same time, it can be tremendously helpful just to take a break and to immerse in a healing environment that supports mindfulness, consciousness, community with safe connection. for the healing of trauma, it can be tremendously helpful to get out of any toxic environments. That can be toxic relationships, toxic workplaces, toxic friendships where, for example, the using of drugs is normal. It's not only accepted, but actually expected. And just taking a break and immersing into healthy connection, into community, into safe relating, and into an environment that supports healing, authenticity, honesty, can be tremendously helpful. Trauma is a nervous system overwhelm, a severe nervous system overwhelm, kept in the body. In the field of trauma science, we differentiate between shock trauma and developmental trauma. You can also say childhood trauma, and the scientific name is complex PTSD. So shock trauma comes when a person barely survives a life-threatening event or witnesses an overwhelming amount of violence. And that can be also come through a car accident or through surgery. But maybe you find it with war veterans or anyone that has survived like a robbery, kidnapping. So that very often it's perceived as a mortal threat. And that overwhelm is kept in the body, in the nervous system, in the muscular structure, and expresses itself through fear of life. When, for example, a truck comes at you and you barely survive that incident, that can be kept in the nervous system as a tendency for anxiety or panic attacks. It can cause a lot of fear and panic, for example, when hearing a truck passing by on the road or when needing to enter a car. That's shock trauma. When that truck that comes at you is your parents that regularly attacked you during childhood. And for a little child, that is the same kind of fear of survival. It's almost like a mortal threat. So when it comes to childhood trauma, a child has a variety of possibilities to cope with it, which mainly depend on the age. Like you can maybe imagine that the newborn baby doesn't have so much like strategies than, let's say, like a 9-year-old or a 3-year-old has different repertoire of or possibilities to react to what it perceives as a threat than even a 6-year-old. Yeah. So that makes the complexity of complex PTSD, of complex trauma. Shutting down, dissociating, numbing themselves, just checking out, becoming blank, just like that is a strategy of a baby that, for example, is abandoned or neglected. When adults come into trauma treatment, we very often find that these childhood strategies that during childhood help the baby or the child to survive very often severe misattunement are taken into adulthood. And while during childhood they were highly effective and functional and important, during adulthood they become dysfunctional. A child, for example, that with the age of 5 or 6 realizes that they cannot trust any of their parents. They don't feel safe with any of their parents, and they are extremely angry, and they really scream for the attention of the parents, right? they very often get a negative attention in forms of being screamed at and punishment. But for a child, that is better than no attention at all, right? So carry that into adulthood. You can imagine like how dysfunctional that gets, right? Because that very often makes you end up in jail. The way to heal or resolve trauma is often a lifelong task. It's a way to gently and carefully address the incident in a way that this is not only talked about, but also felt in the whole pain of it, and then the client learns to be with that huge amount of fear that during the time when the incident happened was unbearable. Very often it was unbearable because the trauma survivor in that situation was alone, just by themselves. So having someone that just is with them while they slowly learn to hold and contain the intensity of the emotion, the fear, the anger and the rage, the sadness and the grief that is attached to it, that then makes it more bearable, and the need to use certain strategies, certain coping strategies, certain survival strategies gets less. So here at Holina, we use a variety of modalities. One for sure is talk therapy, which is not only talk therapy, it's talking and feeling and learning to be with these emotions. It's a therapy that also reflects on our ability to relate to others, and in the first place, to relate to ourselves in a way that supports compassion, heartfulness, and supporting of self, rather than self-hate, self-loathing, self-blaming, self-shaming. And then we also use different modalities for nervous system regulation, which we call somatic therapies, that are body-oriented forms of psychotherapy, so that clients are able to slowly and gently release that bottled up tension inside in a way that is safe and comfortable. We support the capacity for self-reflection and insight through mindfulness practices like meditation, conscious body movement classes. Yeah, so actually that's the whole package. Approach at Holina, holistic, is that combination and working hand in hand between different modalities. And as I just said earlier, that includes trauma-informed psychotherapy. That includes group therapy sessions. That includes body-oriented forms of therapy, nervous system regulation, tension, stress, trauma releasing exercises. That includes art therapy and mindfulness practices. Immersing in community. A lot of the magic here happens in the groups, happens amongst clients, even when there's no therapist around. This environments that supports authentic self-expression, that supports vulnerability, where clients can learn that they are accepted and loved and supported even in their worst. And they don't need to put a smiling face on. They don't need to prove themselves as the strongest, most successful, prettiest, or whatever. That is what's doing the magic here. Take a look around. Held by the paradise-like nature of this tropical island, mm, is something beyond words. It's beautiful in itself. Why am I inviting people to start their journey of healing now and not sometime tomorrow, which very often never happens? Is every day that you live in suffering is a day that you could have spent in enjoying life. And at the same time, pressure doesn't really help much. The healing of trauma is a very long process, very often. The fastest way to heal it is to go slow and steady. At the same time, the earlier you start, the more you can enjoy the rest of your life. How can I know that all these therapies are working for me? My reply is very honest, not at all. Everybody comes with a different complexity. Everybody has a different resonance to different modalities. What's working for one person doesn't necessarily need to work for another. Not all modalities have the same effect on everyone. There will be 1, 2, 3. And it's a combination of all of them, all of the pieces actually that make the puzzle. As we said earlier, one of the effects of trauma is to disconnect from the body. And somatic therapies that support clients in connecting with their body can be as much challenging as they can be, as much helpful they can be, to support clients to come more into embodiment, being able to track more what is happening inside so that they can take action, so that they can feel, oh, here I'm feeling safe. Maybe I need this more in my life. If you're looking for a long-term resolution of anxiety, depression, burnout, addiction, or if you have a diagnosis of trauma, whether it's shock trauma or complex trauma, here at Holina, we're not only offering beyond words beautiful tropical environment, but also a variety of approaches to healing trauma that reaches from talk therapy, somatic therapy, mindfulness. So I invite you to come and have a free of charge introductory meeting with us over Zoom. Then we can explore together how we can help you.